I just spoke to a property investor last week who got slapped with a $2,000 fine for something that would cost just $250 to fix. So the deadlines that you're going to learn about in this video are real. In fact, many more tenants are taking their landlords and property investors to the Tenancy Tribunal for this exact issue. So if you're already a landlord or you're thinking about becoming one, you need to watch this before the 1st of July. Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm Ed, an economist and property investor. This is my mate Andrew, who owns over 40 properties, and together we host New Zealand's #1 property and investing podcast, and this is our conversation. And of course, we're talking about the healthy home standards, which we've actually talked about on the show probably for the last 5 or 6 years. But there is a big deadline coming up on the 1st of July that investors need to pay attention to. But Andrew, what are these healthy home standards?
So the healthy home standards set out the quality of a home, and it's kind of related to mostly things like heating and insulation to make sure that your tenants are comfortable in a warm, dry house. And from the 1st of July, these all have to comply. And if they don't, then your tenants have an incentive to take you essentially to court. Now, not court, but the Tenancy Tribunal, who will rule against you if you haven't complied. And the reason the tenant's incentivized in this instance is if you're fined for a breach of this, it's over $7,000 and the money goes to the tenant.
Yeah, it can be up to $7,000. But yeah, that money does go to your tenant. So if I was a tenant and my landlord hasn't done this, there is a big incentive to go and do it. And we are already seeing in the statistics, tenants are actually doing this. Over the last quarter, over 300 tenants took their landlords to the Tenancy Tribunal.
Over 100 a month.
Over 100 a month. So this is actually happening. Now, this isn't just a law you can ignore, but what I really want to know is, we've heard about this before, what's happening on the 1st of July?
So the rules have been gradually rolled out, and there've been different times that different people have had to meet the standards by. And from the 1st of July, that's all over. There's no more gradual. The 1st of July is D-Day. There is no exception for anyone. Does that include the government?
No, the government also has to comply.
Yeah.
All kaingaora houses, all boarding houses, all community houses. Everyone's going to be complying with the healthy home standards, which doesn't just mean something for your house. It also means something in terms of the paperwork you've got to give your tenants, which we'll talk about in a moment. And we'll get into what this all means. But if you don't do this, it might not just be your tenant who's not happy with you. I've heard of property managers who have fired their landlords, who have fired their clients and said, look, if you are not going to comply with these healthy home standards, it's too much of a risk for us as a property manager because we're going to have to go to the Tenancy Tribunal and fight this. Then you're not going to be happy with us when your tenant eventually wins. So if you're not going to follow the rules, we don't want to work with you.
Which is fair enough as well, because if property managers know that these rules are going to mean more work for them in the event that someone doesn't comply, why would you take on a client that isn't going to listen to your advice?
And if you are looking for an investment property, it's not just important to check out the healthy home standards, it's also important to check out the numbers. So if you are thinking about purchasing investment property, before you sign on the dotted line, it's really important that you run that property through Opus Plus. This is a free tool that we've created for our community where you can put in any property in New Zealand and see whether the numbers actually stack up. I'll drop a link for that down in the description. So we know that things are changing on the 1st of July, but for anybody who's new to property investment, what are the actual healthy home standards? Because there are 5 of them.
Yeah, so the main one is around heating. So you need to make sure that your property has enough heaters and it's got to be sufficient. The heaters have to be sufficient that on the coldest day of the year, you can still heat the main living area to 18 degrees. And that's like in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
So like it could get down, like if you're in Queenstown, we were in Queenstown last week and it was like -1 degree in the middle of the night. You have to have sufficient heating for that house that the main living area can be 18 degrees at that time.
Yeah, I think I read these numbers for Christchurch. I'm pretty sure the minimum temperature is like -4 degrees. So you've got to have quite a big butty heat pump to get it up there.
Big what?
Butty, like substantial.
Is that a word?
I'm pretty sure that's what we used to say at high school. And I know this sounds really simple, but it's actually not. So I know of one landlord who put in, it was like a 5 kilowatt heat pump.
A standard heat pump.
Into their property. And this was like maybe 2018. And they're like, sweet, I've got a heater. Like,
That's a decent heat pump, by the way.
Like it's a good heat pump. Like that'll do the job. Surely that's going to pass the heating stand for the healthy homes. No, because in that area, they actually need a 7 kilowatt heat pump. Now, you might think, well, that's okay. Just put in a couple of extra little heaters, a couple of panel heaters.
Put on 2 kilowatts.
No, just put some panel heaters on the walls, put something in there, little fan heater. No, they're going to have to rip out that 5 kilowatt heat pump, replace it with a 7 kilowatt heat pump. These are like very serious and particular technical standards that you actually have to meet. Now, what are the other 4 factors, just quickly?
So another one's draft stopping. So if you've got noticeable drafts, and particularly old houses that I lived in, absolutely you'd have those. You have to be able to seal those up. So there can't be any gaps under the doors, open fireplaces. So again, with older houses, if you've got an old decommissioned chimney, that's going to be a problem. Next is insulation. So there are minimum levels of insulation that you must have.
And sometimes I remember hearing someone who failed the healthy homes because I think an electrician or a contractor had been up in the roof, accidentally stepped on some insulation that had compacted it, made it shorter because somebody stood on it, so it got squashed. So they no longer met the standards. Again, these are like, you think healthy home standards, you think, oh, okay, as long as it's a nice house, it'll pass.
Or a new house. People think that new houses automatically pass. Absolutely not. The building code and the healthy home standard, 2 different things.
Well, even on draft stopping, you think, oh, it's a new build. It's not gonna have any drafts, and it shouldn't. But sometimes there can be a draft under the door between like the hallway and the garage, if you've got an internal access garage. So, I mean, it can be a simple fix like, what are those things that have like little bristles? It's like a toothbrush for your door.
I actually did this myself in one of my properties. You can get these things from Mitre 10 where it's like a big 1 meter ruler, but you install that on the door, and then you also install a stopper on the wall, and when it brushes up against it, it flips down.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't quite get that. But anyway, it stops the drafts because you put something on there. So insulation, and there's 2 more, but there's ventilation.
Ventilation, so your kitchens and your bathrooms need to have extractor fans.
And I'll give you another example of where this can fail. I heard another story of a property where there was like, those big silvery ducts that go, and when I say ducts, I don't mean quack, quack, I mean DUCT, but that plug into your fan and takes all of that like exhaust outside. So
should have been an engineer with all that technical mind of yours.
Well, my brother-in-law's an engineer. Somebody had, again, it got a little bit squished, failed the standard. So these are very, very technical.
Final one is moisture and drainage. So you need to make sure that your spouting and your drainage around your roof are sufficiently clear. So you might have to make sure that you're getting even the leaves cleaned out of your gutters every couple of years to make sure you don't fail the standard.
And just coming back to the draft stopping, because we've got to talk about the story of the cat door. When we first started talking about the healthy home standards on this podcast, again, like 6 years ago, I got an email from a listener of the show who said, I've just had one of my properties looked at by a healthy homes assessor to sign off all the paperwork, make sure that I've done it correctly. It turns out she failed because she had a cat door in the kitchen door. And the cat door was, there was a little draft coming in because of the cat door. So she failed because of that. So I don't know what she had to do. Maybe she'd
probably have to install a new one with magnets on it to keep it closed.
Oh, that must have been what it was. What if it just had like a little latch on it?
Well, then how would the cat get in and out?
Oh, I don't know. I don't have a cat, but I actually do have a cat door in my house.
Oh yeah, so you might fail the healthy homes.
Oh, my house would 100% fail the healthy home standards if I tried to rent it out.
So would mine.
But what's fascinating is, so my fiancée Angela, she owned a property in Christchurch, and when we were moving to Auckland, she considered keeping it as a rental. And I said to her, just before you do that, you're going to have to see what do you need to do to make this house, which was worth, like almost $1 million. What are you going to have to do to make this healthy homes compliant? And it was a laundry list of things because, even though it was built in the 90s, it didn't have the right heat pump for that area. It probably did have some draft coming between the garage and the main hallway. And while she was quite happy living there, and she sold it to somebody who wanted to live there too, these are technical standards. And that's not to say whether they're good or bad. The laws are what the laws are. The standards are what they are. And if you want to be a property investor, you just have to comply, because otherwise it could cost you up to $7,200 per breach, or a maximum, if you add it up, if you failed on everything, not many would get to this point, but it can be up to $30,000 or even more. So that leads to a really good question, Andrew. What do property investors have to do to make sure that they aren't going to have to pay that $7,000 fine or whatever?
So I think the key thing to take note of if you're a property investor is every single property needs to have a compliance certificate. Now, you can do this yourself, but if I've got $30,000 at risk by getting something wrong, I would pay the couple of $100 to get someone independent, someone who's an expert, come out and do my inspection for me and give me that peace of mind that I've got it right.
And one thing people probably don't realize is just how technical these are. So if we're talking about the heating standard, that's just one of the 5 standards. Tenancy Services, which is like the government agency that provides information to landlords and tenants, like their guide on the heating standard is 15 pages long.
Just their guide.
That's just for one standard. If we look at the ventilation standard, my understanding is that it's even longer. The ventilation standard is 12 pages long. So, if you're going through it, really trying to understand it.
You could be 100 pages of documentation just to get an idea of what the standards are.
Even if you use the heating calculator to figure out how many kilowatts you need for your heater. Like, I've done this myself because I was like, I should give this a go. Like, you have to, don't roll your eyes at me, Andrew.
Just when your time's too valuable.
No, that's very kind. That's the nicest compliment you've told me in a long time. Like, you have to know the size of the windows. Like, and you have to measure them and how big the room is. And if you aren't living in that property, it's very hard to figure that out.
We have to go there.
You'd have to go there. You'd have to, with your measuring tape, and I'll be measuring it up. God. And then, Andrew, what does it say at your end?
Yeah.
That's what we'd be doing. So my view is it is just simpler to pay you $200-300, get somebody else to do it. And again, tenants are taking their landlords to the tribunal. So if I look over the last 3 months at the 10 largest complaints that tenants have had for landlords, so when they've actually taken them to the tribunal, number 1, as you can probably expect, 660 tenants took their landlords to the tribunal to get their bond refunded. That was just over half. But at number 4 on the list, 324 people, tenants, over the last 3 months, or 37%, took their landlord to the tribunal for healthy homes standards.
Over a third.
Over a third. Now, these percentages don't all add up to 100%, because if you make an application, you could have lots of different complaints or lots of reasons you're taking them there. But that's a decent amount. Like, there are a number of tenants who are out there who will take you to the tribunal for the healthy home standards. And the way to protect yourself is by having that healthy homes compliance statement. You legally have to give it to your tenant. And especially now we're at a time where there's no more 120-day grace period where it's you fix it later. You've got to comply on the 1st of July. So if you haven't done it, it's very important. It's a good reminder to say, maybe you should check in with your property manager. Has this actually been done? Can you send me the Healthy Homes compliance statement? Because if they haven't done it, you're still on the hook if you get taken to the Tenancy Tribunal.
The property manager not going to be paying your bill if you haven't complied.
And let's say that I own a property and it doesn't meet the current healthy home standards. What might it cost to bring it up to that standard?
Now, it does depend a lot. So that property you're talking about Angela's before, like that would have been fairly expensive because it's a larger house. It's it's not old, but it's older, and probably the building code has changed quite a bit since then, which again, building code and healthy homes are not related, but a newer property is probably more compliant, I would imagine.
Yeah, I reckon with her house, it probably would have been about 10 grand.
Yeah. So if you think about, a property that's, not too old, you might, have to upgrade the heat pump. It could be anywhere between 2 and 4 grand. Underfloor and ceiling insulation could be kind of about $1,000. Your external kitchen, bathroom venting, that could be about $1,000. Moisture barriers could be, again, anywhere between a couple of $100 to $1,500. So all up, you probably are talking somewhere between a few thousand and up to $10,000.
But what's important to say is healthy homes. We all want tenants to live in healthy homes.
Yeah.
These are not subjective standards. So even though, and not to pick too much on her, but Angela, even though that house, she would have been like, yeah, this is healthy, this is a nice house, it wouldn't have met the standards. Even in her bathroom, so she had an ensuite in that property, when I was in there, I was like, oh, yeah, this wouldn't meet the standards because there was no ventilation. There was no fan in that bathroom.
Which is fine for her because she just opens the door or opens the window.
Just opens the window because when she bought it, it didn't have it, so all good. What do? You open the window. You've just taken out a big mortgage, so you don't be like, okay, let me spend whatever it costs to put the fan in. But that wouldn't have been tenant appropriate, even though she liked that property herself to live in. So that's just why I say to people, we've got to get out of this idea of whatever we think is healthy, whatever we think is okay. What matters is what the tribunal says is okay and what the law says is okay. And I'll give you an example. There was actually a case, this is a few years old now, but there was a case of a landlord. His name was Dennis, and this property was in Ellerslie in Auckland. And his tenant took him to the tribunal because Dennis didn't want to provide a healthy home statement. He didn't provide the compliance documents. The tenant asked for it for 3 times. The landlord replied to the emails but never provided the information. And he said, well, the house is old. There's going to be some drafts because it's an old house.
Take it or leave it.
Tenancy Tribunal said, the law's the law. I don't care if it's an old house. If you want to rent it out, you've got to meet these standards. This was back where there was a little bit more grace, but ultimately they said, fix the house or pay the tenant $1,000.
It'll be interesting to see what happens with some of those areas with a lot of older houses, like the West Coast or Wellington would be another great example. I reckon there'll be a lot of landlords there with student accommodation that really have had to spend a lot of money to get it up to standard. And now is D-Day. If you haven't done it, you will get fined.
So now you know how to avoid being taken to the Tenancy Tribunal, but that's just one piece of the puzzle. Buying the wrong property can ruin your returns before you even start. So make sure you check out this video where we talk about the worst properties you could possibly buy. The kind of ones that look nice on the photos, but in reality, they could drain your bank account dry.